thank you everyone for coming. I know I've been having a great time this week, participating as a host and also watching some of the other alumni come back. It's been incredibly fascinating. Yes, I feel a little older than I want to. However, it's so great, and I'm sure Jefferson Yonkler will agree with me. It's just so great to see everyone, after they've left here. Like sometimes our vision is still that high school student, and it's just lovely to see everybody. We have two fabulous women with us today, just absolutely fantastic. We have Michelle Brown. There she is, who graduated in 2002. I can't believe it. And we have the wonderful Sarah Feliciano, who graduated in 2009. And I'm excited to hear all about what they're up to. So,
I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. So I'm just going to open this up on my computer so I can see it as well. Zach, you can advance the slide if you want. Thank you. So my educational history, like I said, OHS class of 2002. I was born and raised in Ossining. I attended all Ossining public schools for my entire education growing up. So I went to Park, Brookside, Claremont, AMD, and OHS. After OHS, I went to McAllister College, class of 2006. McAllister's located in St. Paul, Minnesota. I was a psychology major and a French and Francophone studies minor. And then lastly, I've done my graduate studies at St. John's University in Queens. I was in a clinical child PhD program, which I completed in 2012, and I earned a master's degree along the way in 2010. So you can move it to the next one. So OHS class of 2002. This is my senior picture, if you can kind of see that.
Look the same.
Thank you. It's weird how much things change, but how little things change. Okay, so favorite classes at OHS. Again, this was a long time ago for me. So I had to take a few moments to try to remember. I would say most of the English classes, obviously I did pick Miss Bayer. I do remember very fondly being in her English classes. I always loved to read. I always loved to write. So those classes were really sort of came very naturally for me. I was in orchestra, my whole Ossining career. I started in third grade, continued through orchestra until I graduated. I always did enjoy that. I wasn't particularly good at violin, but I always enjoyed it. It was nice to, change it up in the day, play a musical instrument, engage in music. I really did find that a nice memory of high school. And then I always still remember AP statistics with Mr. DiCarlucci. I believe that's his name, how you spell it.
That is. He's no longer here, and I feel like the students missed out.
Yeah, you really did. He was really awesome. And I don't know why I remember that class so well, but it was I think all of my friends were in that class. It was a fun class. I didn't particularly like math, but I really enjoyed that class. And he was a really funny teacher. Overall, I would say I was very happy with the education I got at OHS. I really had no complaints. We were asked for this assignment to sort of think back if there was anything we wish we would have learned more of or learned differently. I really don't have anything to add for that. The only thing that I did think of was that as a psychologist now, while I was in OHS, and maybe this has changed, but there was no AP psychology class. And the one psychology class that we did have, looking back now, was not really a psychology class. We basically watched movies and talked about the ill characters, but at the time I was there was no real social science program, no psychology, no sociology. So that was my only sort of thought. I don't know if there is an AP psychology class now. So that's all I had to say. But again, in the end, I thought it was all right because I went to college, I took intro to psychology, and it sort of changed everything for me. And I majored in psychology, and the rest is sort of history. I did feel OHS prepared me very well for life after OHS. I felt very academically prepared in college. I didn't feel like the education was lacking in any way. I felt that compared to my peers, I had probably better than average critical thinking skills, open-mindedness, which I do attribute to growing up in Austining and going through the public schools in Austining, and also diversity being a huge component. I don't think I realized or appreciated it while I was at Austining, but going to college in the Midwest, I met people who, had never gone to a school with non-white people, so which was crazy to me. And like, didn't even cross my mind that, there were places like that in the world. Because growing up, so used to so much diversity, you don't really. So that was one thing I've always like really cherished about Austining was just like the diverse student population, the diversity of the town, sort of like a real melting pot there.
Michelle, did you find, where you ended up going, was there a diversity there, or you were still struck by the lack of diversity?
I would say so. McAllister College, which I'll get to on the next slide, even though it was in a very sort of like, I would consider white area of St. Paul, Minnesota, like white affluent area, the college itself prided themselves on diversity and internationalism. So there was a huge international population. It was, for a small private liberal arts college, extremely diverse. So I felt very comfortable there. And I think some of my peers actually struggled with the diversity of McAllister because they were not accustomed to that. They'd come from places where there just was not that kind of diversity. And I guess I was just really surprised for how ready I was for life after OHS. Full disclosure, I was not like a huge fan of Austining at the time that I was in high school. I wanted out. I had grown up there. My mother grew up in Austining, went to Austining High School. My whole family was from there. I just felt like I wanted out. I did have like a close group of friends in high school, but I wasn't by any means like the most popular person. I was never in like the in crowd. I was just kind of like with like my little nerdy friends, and we had like fun together, and I loved school and I had a few hobbies, but I really wanted out of Austining. So for me, the transition to college was very easy. I was really ready, and I had a lot of fun, both at Austining and in college. So I don't know if that resonates for any of you, but that was certainly my experience. So you can go to the next. Oh, thank you. You did. So just to like kind of move it along, I went to McAllister College, class of 2002. We kind of covered some of this. A lot of people ask me how I ended up at McAllister, how I picked it. I was looking mostly at private liberal arts colleges in the Midwest and West Coast. McAllister had been suggested to me. It was like always on the short list of those kinds of like private liberal arts, sort of like nonconformist. There's no Greek life, no big sports programs, really sort of like educationally focused, small classes, things like that. So I visited. We actually flew out. It was, I think, the first or second day after they resumed air travel after 9/11. It was September of 2001. Flew out and I visited and I loved it, and I applied early decision, and in the end it was the only school I applied to, and I ended up going there.
You said that you wanted to go to the Midwest or West. So did that have to do with what you were talking about before, that you just wanted out of Austining, or just like the Northeast in general?
Yeah, I really wanted to live in a different part of the country, and I was looking for those kinds of schools, and it seemed like they were sort of clustered in the Midwest and the West Coast, like primarily Minnesota, Ohio. So I was looking at like McAllister, Carleton, Oberlin, and then a few schools over in California. So, in the end, McAllister just kind of like spoke to me, and it was just sort of like where I visited and where I ended up. I thought I wanted to be pre-med when I went to college. I had always wanted to be a doctor. I always wanted to be a pediatrician. That changed though pretty quickly. So when I got to college, and again, I came from Austining. I thought, I took AP chemistry. I did very well in it. I thought, oh yeah, college science, no problem. I took like basically intro to chemistry, and it was the hardest class I ever took. It was way harder than AP chemistry. It just didn't make sense to me. I had to work so hard for like basically what I felt like I was only understanding half of the material. It just didn't come naturally to me. And I just realized like if I was struggling that much with intro to chemistry, that being a science pre-med major was going to be like pretty torturous. So at that point, I just started taking a lot of different classes. I took an intro to psych class. I loved it. It just made sense to me. Never looked back, majored in it. And my career has been in
I'm really glad, and we're going to have to move a little faster because we want to give Sarah some time, but I really like that you're talking about this, because I think a lot of students go, and if they already have something in their head and then they realize when they go there, oh, this isn't what I want to do, they think, well, do I have any choice? And it sounds like you were able to go into something else and be able to successfully focus on that.
Yeah, and you know, it's all about really keeping an open mind and not keeping yourself really like stuck in any one pathway. I'm probably going to move it along after this one because I realize like for time constraints and also just for what's relevant to the OHS students. I did want to mention though, I did minor in French and Francophone studies, and I was able to study abroad, which if anyone ever has the opportunity, I know not everyone does, but it was the most like amazing experience. And I think it really did transform me as a person. And, you know, living outside of the US, living in another country, really, really opens your eyes. It just like gives you such a bigger appreciation of the world and the people in it. So I can't recommend that enough. If you have the opportunity, please take advantage of it. You won't regret it. So just moving forward, I studied abroad in Montpellier, France, in the south of France. So quickly, I did my graduates program at St. John's University. Like I said, it was a clinical child PhD program. I know this is like a ways out for anybody that's in high school right now. I was not even thinking about graduate school in high school. So you know, I have these slides available, and I'm really happy to talk about the process of becoming a psychologist or getting your PhD. Anybody who's interested, I encourage you to reach out to me. I'm so happy to do mentorship or to offer any sort of guidance that I can. So I won't talk too much about that other than to say that I did my PhD program from 2007 to 2012. I graduated with my PhD. I got licensed in psychology. So I am now a New York State licensed psychologist since 2013. And if you want to just kind of skip through to the next one, Zach, just with the current employment. Yep, thank you. So right now I'm the Deputy Director of the Psychological Assessment Section for the NYPD. I oversee the section that completes the pre-employment psychological suitability evaluations for candidates applying for law enforcement. So specifically, any candidate applying for police officer will come through my section and we'll do the psychological evaluation. So that's my full-time job in the city. I do live in Westchester, so I commute every day. And I also am a clinical psychologist in private practice, where I specialize in 9/11 first responders and survivors, primarily with PTSD, anxiety, and mood disorders. So again, those slides are available for you if you're interested, if you want to know about working for the city, if you want to know about, you know, working for the NYPD, anything, you know, NYPD has so many civilian jobs and law enforcement jobs. Any job with the city or state is an amazing position. You have great benefits, highly recommend it. And then the private practice really affords you a lot of flexibility. It gives you a lot of variety. It's something you can always fall back on if you decide you don't want to work for anyone anymore and you just want to work for yourself. Right now, I'm doing primarily the NYPD is full-time in person in Manhattan. My private practice is primarily virtual since COVID, which has been working out fine. Actually, it's really sort of changing the the picture of what therapy looks like. But it's been a really fun ride so far. I do have some words of advice later on, but you can read those at your leisure. I don't know if these slides get provided, but if anybody wants them, you can email me and I'll be happy to give them to you. And like I said, I'm happy to give any sort of like guidance, advice, or mentorship.
Thank you so much. I know, I'm sure everybody does. I have 100 questions. Yeah, hopefully we have a couple minutes to go over it. But, just some comments here. I was even thinking, some of the things I was thinking of was, given the current climate, have you had to change your approach? And just the fact that, like you said, you went to go see your college, right after, the 9/11 events. And it must be, I would think, so fulfilling to work with those who have been affected by it, given your experience with it.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes first in terms of the 9/11 experience. I mean, I remember I was at OHS on 9/11. So, being able to like go through that experience with the rest of the world, and then now later on in my career, be able to sort of come back. It's an interesting sort of like connection. I feel like much more connected now to 9/11 than I did at the time. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. The people I work with are amazing. 9/11 first responders, mostly NYPD, FDNY, and like trade workers who were there in the recovery efforts. They're amazing people and they have amazing stories. I feel very privileged to be able to understand. I mean, their experiences are heartbreaking, but I feel very privileged to even like know about the stories and have access to the stories, because it is something that I feel like over time is getting a bit forgotten, and it's not as sort of relevant to people as it was for us. People now growing up, like, 9/11 didn't happen during their lifetime. It's not something that they remember or recall. And in terms of NYPD, just quickly, have we changed our approach given the current climate? No, we've always been holding the line here. We have always been very mindful of any sort of like indicators of any risk that would be sort of like a concern in a police officer candidate. We do have a very, rigorous, we fail about 50% of the people that apply. It doesn't mean that they're psychologically unfit. It just means that they're not suitable for the position they're applying for. So we have always held the line very strong here, and we continue to do so. Obviously, we're mindful and aware of the events happening in the country. There is more research that needs to be done in the field to really know if these are things that we can be seeing on a pre-employment level. Are these behaviors and cultures that develop after a person is hired as a police officer? So it's always something that we're looking at, and it's obviously like a very relevant topic in the country right now.
Okay, I have something. I actually want to talk to you after, because
yeah,
we do focus on 9/11 units now, and it's amazing to me that I'm focusing on a generation who is just post 9/11. So I want to talk to you later about it, but we're gonna switch. Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna switch to Sarah and hear her story. Okay, so Sarah, you have the floor.
So my name is Sarah Feliciano. I'm OHS class of 2009. I will try and be very brief, as I know time is limited. I'm born and raised in Ossining. My mother's actually a TA at Park School for like 30-something years. Similar story. I also wanted to get the hell out of Ossining, not because it wasn't a great environment, but because I was just so at home and sheltered, and I wanted to experience something that I never experienced before. So that being said, my first slide is going to look vastly different from my second slide because I did not know what I wanted to do exactly when I first went to get my undergraduate degree. So I first went to Binghamton and I studied English literature and creative writing. I double minored in theater and cinema. I've always been interested in English and math, and I knew that the skill that I really wanted to hone in on was English. And that being said, I took 2 of Miss Bayer's courses, and the most important course I ever took, no offense, Mr. Jaffis, in school, was AP English, because it really gave me a one-up when I went to college. I was able to get my essays done really quickly. I was able to write really efficiently, and that's actually traveled or carried over into my current career and field.
I never liked you.
Well, actually, no, I wanted to say something funny, actually. I remember in your class, we had one particular project where we had to choose a company and look and see if they were a good company to invest in. And I chose Marvel before all the movies came out. And I remember saying it was a very good company because it was steady. So I think it's news now. But anyway, so yeah, so I kind of went a more creative route in my undergraduate. And then after I graduated, it took a while to find a job, about 8 months to find a full-time position. And actually another Ossining alum managed to get me a job at a co-working space. So I was, they made up the title space captain, but I was like general manager of all these different things. So we had a community of about 165 people, and I was bartending, I was coming up with community events, potlucks, I was giving tours, I did everything. And I love that job. I am happy to talk about co-working any day. But after that place closed its doors in 2015, I ended up finding work as an office manager at a property management firm, and I still do that. The reason why I'm still there is because it gives me flexibility for my graduate work, which I'll go into now. So I was not happy because my work was not helping people, and I realized I always wanted to help people. And so I remember reading a book. It's called The Sociopath Next Door by Martha Stout. And I was like, wow, this combines my love of psychology and my love of crime. Well, not that I love crime, but I find crime interesting. And so I looked all across the Eastern Seaboard for a program that had forensic psychology, and I found it at John Jay. I ended up, after one semester, switching over to forensic mental health counseling, because forensic mental health counseling, that program ensures that you are license eligible for an LMHC, so licensed mental health counselor. And I've been working on that since 2017. I want to piggyback off what Michelle said. I think the only complaint I've ever had about OHS is that they really didn't have any psych classes when I went. So since I didn't really take that many psych classes in undergrad, I had to kind of take some more to even qualify for, entrance into this program. So it's a lot of a learning curve. I will say that even though I have not graduated yet, I've been exposed to a lot of amazing opportunities. And this is where I really want to emphasize, if anyone is interested in this field, please take as many research opportunities as you can. So I actually have done 2 big projects. One is John Jay has a program that they do with the FBI, which is one of 2 colleges, I think, in the country, where students are able to look at fully adjudicated cases, like closed cases, of either, actually, no, it's pretty much all homicide, but there's also arson and other cases that you can look at. And one of our classes, we were supposed to put together research groups, look at a certain thing, and ours just happened to be published in the FBI Bulletin, Law Enforcement Bulletin, in September of last year, finally. So if you want to read that, I have a link for it. It's Confessions and Intimate Partner Homicide. I've been a part of the Sex Trafficking and Domestic Violence Lab for 3 years now, and I'm actually, my whole life currently is focused on my own research project that I started. It's titled Coercive Control and Trauma Bonding in Cults. And basically, I've interviewed to date 50 ex-cult members, and I've learned about their entire holistic experience, what it was like to join, what it was like to be in the group, and what it was like to leave. And that's been an eye-opening experience. So those are my 2 biggest research things. And I will say, like, research sounds like, snooze button, but I actually really, really love doing research. I also was an extern at Fifth Avenue Forensics. So that entailed writing forensic evaluations for the court. And again, writing is so important for this field because you need to be able to write very quickly and very efficiently. And so I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with Brooklyn Supreme Court or any court system really. But Brooklyn is interesting because they have a mental health court. A lot of different courts don't have mental health courts, and they're trying to incorporate them. And what that really means is, like, if you have someone who's committed a low-level crime and has a mental illness, what they'll offer is they'll say, hey, here's this program you can do. If you plead guilty and you commit to the program, we'll either lessen the charges or completely drop them, because they acknowledge that the person is mentally unfit or their mental illness had some sort of effect on their offense conduct. So I basically wrote those evaluations for the judge, and then the judge would decide whether or not somebody was eligible for mental health court or not. Trying to like breeze through this so we have time for questions. I was also a teaching assistant, so I've pretty much had my hand in research and assessment, in teaching. Still don't know what I want to do. So I'm supposed to graduate in August, knock on wood, if my thesis allows me to. But I just kind of want to give this advice. And these are like my main, most important pieces of advice. Use your time at OHS to learn time management. I know that that's not a fun thing, but there's so much that you can do if you just manage your time wisely. And I don't know if you guys are familiar, but you know how there's like a triangle that says sleep, good grades, and a social life? That's a real thing. I had a lot of trouble, and I'll tell you, my sleep my lack of sleep took a toll. My other personal thing is, please gain work experience before you start looking. I had some volunteer work, so that helped me when I was looking for a job, but you know, it's very difficult to find a position right out of undergrad because so many employers want like 1 to 3 years of experience plus a degree. That's not to scare you. I'm just saying, I think that it's prudent, if you think about long-term now, to just work anywhere, work absolutely anywhere, and you'll be fine. Yeah, besides take advantage of research opportunities, I do want to say, if you enter this field, prioritize self-care. It is very traumatic to look through a lot of the things that I look through and hear the accounts that I hear. But as long as you manage to take time for yourself and unwind and decompress, you're going to be okay. And then also be bold and have fun. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. You both really, I think, need your own period to go through everything, and they're both so valuable. We did have some questions prior. I'm going to go back and see if we addressed all of them. Michelle, it was asked, and I guess this can go to both Sarah and Michelle. Did you have debt from your degrees?
So my path's probably a little different than most. I've been very fortunate. With Macalester, my undergrad, we did, I think, pay for the majority of it. That was like from my family savings, so we were able to cover that, and I didn't really leave with any debt from undergraduate. Graduate school, because I did a PhD program that I didn't get to explain sort of, but PhD programs often will offer you full scholarships in exchange for research, and it's kind of like a work study setup. So I had full tuition reimbursement for the first 2 years, plus they give you a bit of a stipend. And then my 3rd and 4th year, I was working for the college counseling center, so that gave me a 50% tuition reimbursement. I think in the end, I paid out of pocket maybe like under $10,000 for my PhD. And I have no student debt. I've never had any student debt, which I know I've been very fortunate. And I also did always work. I think Sarah mentioned that. I think that is so important. I've always worked. I had a job since I was like 15 years old. I worked at the church, the United Methodist Church next door, which is currently, OHS might be buying it. But I worked there as a secretary. I worked there in the daycare center. I worked all through undergraduate doing work in my field. Like I worked as an autistic special needs counselor. I've done always work. And even through grad school, I was working at Ruth's Chris in Tarrytown. as a server for 5 years. So always been hustling. But, you know, I've never regretted that. And I've always been able to make my own money and have my own money. And, you know, if you like to work, it comes easy to you. I've always been fortunate in that respect.
Yeah, I had a vastly different experience. I still do have some undergraduate debt. I managed to pay most of my master's out of pocket because CUNY schools thankfully have a very small tuition. Yeah, I mean, usually if you start working, you'll pay it off. So you don't have to worry too much about that. And frankly, the loan situation now, given the current climate, is like a little more lax. I think they're just happy to get any money paid back if you have a loan with the state or a federal loan. But yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to pay for schooling, especially when now it's kind of required that you have an undergraduate degree. But I would highly recommend, especially Binghamton, SUNY schools and CUNY schools have a very good reputation, and they're pretty affordable.
Great. Ariel Gregory asked, and this is directed toward Michelle, but I think this applies to both. What was the hardest part of getting your degrees?
I would say, I think just the time commitment. You know, there were, again, I don't regret anything. And part of my words of advice, which I didn't share, was just to like take it 1 year at a time, especially when you're getting an advanced degree. Had I really known how long it was all going to take and sort of the huge commitment that a PhD and a career in psychology is in the beginning, it might have scared me off. But I think, you know, there were times in my mid-20s where I was like, you know, third year grad school, you still have like at least 2-3 years ahead of you. And you're just feeling like you're looking at your peers and they have like full-time careers and they're making real money and they have like real lives. And I was still like basically a student until I was 28. So I think that was the hardest part for me, was just feeling like my sort of like adult life didn't settle down until I was almost 30. Being in school and doing all the training, you know, like I didn't meet my current husband until I was 30, you know, so I felt like things were sort of delayed, but you get there in the end. So I think that was sort of the hardest part for me, was just feeling like, wow, this is like a long haul here. And Sarah, I don't know about you.
I mean, the pandemic kicked back my timeline like a year, so I'm not thrilled about that. But for all case and purposes, all my coursework and my externship, everything's done. The only holdout is the thesis. But getting my undergraduate was pretty simple because it was structured. It was like, you have 4 years exactly to do this, and I finished in 4 years, and it was fine. So I can't speak to a PhD program, but I do plan on doing that in the near future. And I do know it's a time commitment.
Okay, I know I have more questions. I know a lot of other people have more questions, but we're out of time, unfortunately, like really unfortunately. I'm going to contact both of you privately because I already see a place for you as guests in my classroom. So just be prepared for that in both my 11th grade and 12th grade. So, you know, I just want to congratulate both of you. I want to thank both of you. I think this has been absolutely wonderful. Yeah. And also, you know, wish you well with everything, but I'll be talking to you anyway.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming.